This is RF, and you're listening to Country Lunch on WOOL 91.5 FM. And today we have an interview with Paleo Mountain Man and Bud Cat 7, and this is the February 19th interview, part 1.
Dave, why do you
So,
think Stonewall? It's sort of a local phenomena in the Northeast.
well, it's certainly local to the northeastern part of the United, of North America, put it that way, because you have it in Canada too. But
But
why is it that way? Because this is probably where the concentration of the people who survived what sort of, you know, catastrophic event happened in the past. For some reason, they survived more easily, or to put it that way, on the eastern part of North America here, whereas the rest of the U.S., let's say, and parts of Canada or whatever, just was totally wiped out by whatever catastrophe or cataclysm occurred. And there were many. I don't go really a lot into it on my channel, but other researchers do, about there's all these geological features, often a lot of them being the result of either asteroid impacts or something going on from space. I mean, I have a different explanation for it from the people I follow, but the whole entire all of North America really shows evidence of some major catastrophic event happening to it. And we can tell that by the history that we understand about it from the geologists. So, I mean, they're aware of this sort of catastrophe going on some 11, 12,000 years ago. And then prior to that, it was Australia some 20 to 40,000 years ago. But apparently, the rest of the world didn't experience it to the extent that the Americas did. So that's something interesting right there, where they can detect extinctions in... Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's hard for me to get a grip on timeline because you smack right into the face of glaciers that are 2 miles thick.
Yeah, but I mean, me, I don't really believe in that. I mean, I don't even want to go into the
What I
whole
was going to say is
thing or whatever.
I don't
That's
see.
another phony theory too. So I mean, that's just
I think
nonsense.
a lot of glacial activity happened, but I think there was a lot of in betweens where it never did. Not as much as they say, or at least in the recent times, because a lot of the history, even in the stone walls, where I am, they're pretty sophisticated, and a lot of the places in the woods, they just meander. They're not even high. They're several inches high, even a couple stones high, but they meander through the woods, and they seem like a different era of before, and that all would have been wiped out. If we're talking the newer walls are older, or the better walls are newer, it still puts it back 15,000 years when the glaciers were
you're going
receding.
far back in time, and not only that. I mean, Vermont is one of the states that has these dolmens. The dolmens that are, as people like to identify with those found in, let's say, Ireland or the UK
They're
or
exactly
on the northern
they're
parts
exactly
of Europe.
alike. Exactly.
So you have these dolmen, which is clear evidence of Neolithic. We're not even talking Paleolithic. We're talking about Neolithic, which goes even further back. And as you say, the timeline is erroneous because we don't really know what that is. But as I said, there's some evidence of some sort of catastrophe or cataclysm occurring 11 to 12,000 years ago. They attribute it to the Ice Age, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason why all this loose stone and boulders and everything is all around the at least the upper part of the United, well, it's all over the place, what they call drift or low or whatever it is. It's all this stone that, none of the geologists could ever figure out where it came from, and hence this is where the whole Ice Age theory comes from, because part of it is, where did all this loose stone come from everywhere? Obviously,
And
something
that's
has
the
to
excuse
happen.
for everything too. Is ice did it? Glaciers did
Exactly,
it.
and
Ice did it.
they find some of this down in the tropics, so they want to make a case that the whole entire Earth was covered by one giant glacier. And obviously, if you go down to the tropics today, no matter what time period there ever was, it's going to be a lot hotter there. So much so hotter there that today they never experienced snow or anything else down there. So it's a little difficult to believe that there were 1 mile high ice sheets in the tropics. Nothing has changed. They don't tell us that the orbit of the Earth changed from a more distant part. Whatever it is, they can't explain it. The only reason that they have, the only explanation they have for all the rock and stone that's strewn all over the planet was this ice age. That was the only way to come up with it. And that was Louis Agassiz in 1823 when they came up with this theory. So the theory itself is, at this point, how old is it? It's a 200-year-old theory. And it's a bad one because, as many critics say, that they forgot to check with physicists.
How do you explain?
When they designed that theory. So, but that aside, we could discuss endlessly on, the merits of the Ice Age theory or whatever it is. But to get back to the walls and the stone constructions in the Northeast, obviously we start out with the oldest ones. And some of the very oldest ones can be found in the Vermont area. That's one of the Vermont is unusual in a couple of ways. Number one, it has this Neolithic dolmen-type stonework there, okay? Because when we were on Mount Ephraim, the state of Vermont more or less publishes, puts out a statement that there are mysterious stone constructions on Mount Ephraim. In other words, their state archaeologists and anthropologists and geologists cannot identify who and when and how these dolmen constructions up on Mount Ephraim were made. So they admit they have no answer for any of that stuff. So that's right off the bat. But those stone constructions, the Neolithic stone constructions, are only tangentially related to the stone walls because obviously they happened at a time period way before the bulk of the stone walls were built. And Jimmy's right. In anything, any archaeological site where there's been habitation over, centuries, millennia, et cetera, you're going to find evidence in those areas of early construction, middle construction, later constructions, et cetera, et cetera. So there's going to be evidence, but often it's going to be difficult to discern because we know that the Aboriginal peoples, whoever they were from the past, often built in stages. So they built something, then they built something else on top of it, then something happened later on, a chief died or whatever it is, then they added to it. They didn't create a completely different structure, they added to it. So it's conceivable that the stone walls were also treated in a similar manner. But it seems to me that it's evident that many of the stone wall constructions occurred roughly within a relatively close time period, put it that way, because of the way that they're constructed and the way that they look and the similarities and, whatever's going on in them.
Do you have any ideas on the walls we're talking about, the acoustic-built walls and the ones on Ephraim, how widespread that might be? Because I don't know if that particular construction, I've seen a lot of walls, a lot of pictures of walls in New England, and a lot are similar, but they're more dissimilar than they are similar to those walls.
Yeah, I would say, this regional style.
Right.
Okay,
right.
like if you go to Dennis D's area in eastern Connecticut, right, there's a lot more flat stone in that area to work with. So a lot of the walls, a lot of the effigies, a lot of the cairns and other stone constructions are built in a style that's amenable to using sort of flattish, squarish, rectangular stone, whereas more like up by you guys in Vermont there and in New York State as well, the stone is more irregular shaped. So, I mean, obviously there's going to be
and if you don't have stone, you build in earth. If you don't have stone, you build earthworks. Like in Ohio, they have earth, so they used earthworks to do the same exact thing.
Right, they didn't have as much stone. But as you can see from, if you remember the photos that the kind lady sub sent me from the Catskill of the eye in the wall, you could see the serpent head effigy in the wall there. It was, I mean, I would say, my opinion about it is absolutely identical.
Right.
Absolutely identical in the way that it was constructed. And the messages that were trying to be sent there, although the one by the lady over there seemed a bit more pristine to me than some of the others.
And my question is, how do you get it back then, if you're considering the walls are 500 or 1,000 or 10,000 years old, however old they are, how did they line them up so straight to north and south? How did they do
they
it?
obviously had advanced knowledge of astronomy.
They had an astronomer.
What was going on in the sky, obviously.
So astronomers pretty much built the wall. And
right.
The wall is all about astronomy, the ones I'm talking about.
Right.
They're all about knowing the heavens and their calendars. They time events. They have special writing in the walls, glyphs. I don't know how to explain it except glyphs. You know what I'm talking about. It's a
and
glyph.
Also the cycles of the moon, the metonic cycle. I mean, obviously we have evidence of that from the
and the constellations also. The constellations.
The moon cycle. The moon cycle. It's gonna.
That's pretty obvious too, because it's lined north-south, and you can see the western and eastern horizon, and the moon sets on the western horizon. In a lot of mornings, it'll be a full moon setting on the horizon at different points, at different times of the year, just like the sun moves in the sky. And it was aligned to that also. And there's standing stones that are set apart from the wall that make alignments. There's smaller standing stones that make other alignments. There's stones in the woods that show you where you are. There's stones that tell you things, stories. Right, they use stone for everything. And
the language
and when they built the walls, they used them to tell stories. And they built parts of the walls that had these big glyphs that have like
as I said, I mean, I think it's hard for people to sort of it's hard for people to think about it in a sort of larger context or a bigger picture, and sort of it's hard for people to relate it to what we have today because everything is so, different than, what it is today. But obviously, I don't know how many people can walk down the street anywhere in any town, USA, or even around the world or whatever, and you see a building, right? You're looking at a building, and on the outside of the building is painted, let's say, a mural or, no parking sign is slapped on it. I mean, it's just, people are people. No matter, I don't care whether they're large hominids, as long as they can think and talk and, postulate or whatever it is. People are people. So if you're building a wall, cairn, or this or that or whatever, I mean, they can incorporate the same sorts of things as we do today. Okay? So, as I said, you're walking along the street, you look at the wall, it's a brick wall or whatever, or a building, whatever, and right smack in the middle of it is a sign that says, no parking, no graffiti, no blah, 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 or whatever it is. Well, what's to say that, people weren't doing the same exact thing in the past?